Hello and welcome to Times Now. I'm Malvika Jain and I have with me Margaret Talev, the director of Syracuse University's Institute for Democracy, Journalism, and Citizenship here in Washington, D.C. Margaret, thank you so much for joining us today. My first question to you is that, the U.S. is going to have its formal election tomorrow. So, of course, early voting has been going on. Who do you think is likely to win? You've been tracking these elections for so many years now.
The polling literally for weeks has showed this race in a dead heat, or effectively a dead heat, too close to call. Coming out of the conventions, it looked like Vice President Harris might have taken a lead. In the weeks that followed, former President Trump seemed to be closing in some states maybe even bypassing her. And now it looks, maybe in some places it swung back the other way. The bottom line is it's too close for any experts to be making a prediction. That is, if the polling is correct, it could come down to a nail biter, and we may not know for days to come.
But why is it that Harris is losing ground if we were to believe in the polls and if we were to think that they were representative also for the Electoral College and not just for the popular vote?
But to be clear, it's not true anyone is gaining or losing ground. It may just be a fluctuation in the polls, but there are a couple of things going on. And one is that the United States is a very politically divided nation right now. They're just it's almost tied, and it has been for a long time, whether people lean to the right or lean to the left, and as a result, which candidate they favor. But one of the other big factors that we've seen going on in this particular election is not just the economy, which could mean a lot of different things, but it's inflation, and it's the impact that inflation is having on voters' day-to-day lives and their nostalgia for a time before the pandemic when they had more money in their pockets and it went further.
And who do you think can be blamed for that? I mean, inflation in many ways is also because of external factors that are external to the US economy, actually.
Well, we're seeing, by the way, a global trend, right? That
Exactly.
is very much so in many countries, sort of an anti-incumbent trend that makes the races not even close like this one is, and that can be largely tied again to the repercussions of COVID and the supply chain delays that we've had. But there's a old cliche in American politics. The buck stops here, or the buck stops at the top, and the bottom line is that people are going to blame the officials in power, the party in power. And Kamala Harris is the sitting vice president right now. So even though she has sought to differentiate herself from President Biden and said, I have my own ideas, I'd govern my own way, people still associate her with not just the current administration, but the current moment. I do think you can make the argument that says, look, any president, whoever the president was, even if it was Donald Trump right now, would still have been contending with 9% inflation and all of the after effects of COVID.
Possibly.
But it's one thing to have an intellectual discussion about that. It's another thing to convince voters that that's how they should be processing this information. And on the other hand, we know that the other big issue on the ballot, especially for women, is abortion rights, reproductive rights, and what the Democrats have pretty successfully packaged as bodily autonomy, the right to make decisions about your own body. And then I would say one of the third elements on the ballot is Trump himself. It's a referendum not just on the Biden-Harris administration, but it's a referendum on Donald Trump and January 6th and his policies and his rhetoric. There is an element of American society that loves it and wants it back, and quite a large element of American society that doesn't and is trying to balance that against their concerns about inflation.
Are there any other previous elections that you can draw parallels from? Has the race ever been as close as it is today?
Well, you don't have to stretch your mind too far back to look at 2020, which was an extraordinarily close race that took 4 days to determine the outcome of, to determine that President Biden had in fact won. And you'll remember that to this day, Donald Trump does not accept the legitimate election results that he lost, in part because the race was so close.
And what
In the
about the
US,
Gore versus Bush battle? I mean, it was also similarly close, wasn't it?
yeah, there American presidential races have been close for some time now, and I will say this also: in the U.S., as you know, elections are not, the presidential election is not determined by the winner of the popular vote. That's why Hillary Clinton won the popular vote and still lost the presidency in 2016. So that's why you hear so much talk about the battleground states, these 7 states where the race is believed to be the closest. And that's because no matter who wins the popular vote, the overall majority of Americans' preference, it will come down to the states and how many electoral votes they each have. It's kind of a convoluted system. Even if you live in it, even if you understand it on paper, it's still hard to get the impression of this, that most people could want somebody else and somebody else could still win based on what states people live in and how those electoral votes are apportioned. So look, all the polling could be off by a bit and the winner of this race may become instantly clear. But the expectation is different. It's that it will be extraordinarily close and could take a number of days until all those ballots are counted and we really understand where the verdict has come down.
Well, you mentioned about the swing states, particularly the state of Pennsylvania. You're seeing till the last day, both the candidates are canvassing in the state. What makes it so unique?
Well, it's the largest of the 7 swing states. So it has 19 electoral votes. You need 270 electoral votes to win the presidency. 19 is a pretty good haul, and it's believed that it would be difficult for either Harris or Trump to win without Pennsylvania. But also, Pennsylvania is a really closely divided state, and it has it has 3 important subgroups to pay attention to if you're watching this from afar and trying to understand the contours of what's going on. One are African American voters, especially around the city of Philadelphia. Donald Trump has tried to eat into Vice President Harris's lead with Black men in particular. Will he succeed, or will she turn out the African American vote? Another subgroup are people who had voted in the past for Nikki Haley, who is a conservative Republican, but who appealed to many more women and kind of traditional, international, hawkish, that sort of sector of voters. Are Nikki Haley voters going to revert to Trump? Or are they going to go to Harris because they're disgusted with Trump and have already moved away from him? That's a key question. Finally, Puerto Rican voters. This is a hugely important block. Many really insulted by the comedian at a recent Donald Trump rally who described Puerto Rico as garbage. And there are a sizable number, I think it's around 500,000 of Puerto Rican heritage voters living in Pennsylvania, especially in the Philadelphia area. Those 3 voting segments could actually be key. And then there's the possibility that one of these other states that are not a swing state could surprise us and steal the night.
And what do you make of the role of the Indian American voters, the Indian immigrants? They are known to be an influential community, not just in the swing states, but across the spectrum. What do you think is their role in the elections?
Look, I think no voting bloc is monolithic. And when both parties try to assume what a voter will do just because of their ethnic heritage, they may be wrong, right? In India, there are Modi supporters and there are people who don't support Modi. And if you try to transpose that into your vision of American politics, you'll see that there are Indian American voters who lean left and who lean right and who live in different states. But again, where the rubber really meets the road are in these 7 key battleground states, in areas where there are significant Indian American populations and they overlay with the battleground state. Boy, that is a hot ticket, and every candidate better be courting those voters.
Well, it is indeed a very close race, and we will be keeping track of all the developments. Thank you so much, Margaret. It was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for your time.